When I started out down the road testing budget snowblowers, I had no idea that the lesser amount that you pay for them, the shorter the handles. This Greenworks 40 volt is absolutely hard for me to use, but it is a very impressive small snowblower for someone who might not be as tall as I am, but also might not have a very large driveway to clean. It did some amazing work. This is a 20-inch model, single stage. Next to it, we have the Wild Badger. At Lowe's, the Wild Badger is $389. So $89 more expensive than the Greenworks. But with that, you get a longer handle and some very similar build qualities. As far as using these two next to each other, the Greenworks really got down to the driveway, got that thing clean, and was able to throw a decent amount of very, very heavy, wet snow. Also, the Wild Badger ended up having to throw some of that wet snow that the Greenworks threw over, still did a very good job cleaning the driveway, and still did an excellent job of throwing things very far. If you want to look at how they worked out at the end of the driveway prior to the plow coming, it was wet, and both these machines were absolutely very impressive to see get pushed through that amount of water and packed snow that have been driven over multiple times. While there are design differences between the two, I look at them and really question if they are made by the same company. Here is the Greenworks 40 volt 4 amp hour battery, and then here is the Wild Badger 40 volt 4 amp hour battery. Now they both will slide into the same place. They won't fully click in, but they're both so similar that they'll slide into the same slot. Greenworks has its fuel gauge up front along with the Wild Badger. I'll tell you, these things charged up nice. Everything worked well. They both have LED lights. The Wild Badger has an LED light up front. The Greenworks has it up back, a little more up top. To turn them on, they both have a button. You push, pull the bail, and it's running. As far as noise-wise, they're both very similar. Wild Badger, you push on this button here, pull back. The Wild Badger takes longer to get going, but doesn't cut out. The Greenworks cuts out pretty quick as far as its DigiPro brushless engine. If you stop it somewhere, jamming it into something, it will turn off. The Wild Badger's brushless motor will not cut out as quickly, and you're able to slam it into things where it will slow down and come back, but it definitely doesn't have the cutout like the Greenworks. Both have a geared situation for the height of the snow, so that sits good. They're both easy here to move, and they both stayed in place. There's a handle to pick this guy up. I use that handle on both. It works well to get in and out of the truck. To move the chute on the Greenworks, it is around back. It is a simple move, and it stays in place. I like that. The Wild Badger is on top. While it's a little bit more sloppy, I like the positioning because when I'm using it, I can just hit it over, hit it back. It just was easier than coming around the bottom, especially with the Greenworks being so low. The impellers look very similar when you look at them, but they are definitely not. The Greenworks has a metal bar going across, but this is plastic. And a lot of people say, oh, I wouldn't like that. But this is not the first small Greenworks we've had. And this guy is actually very impressive, especially if you get into ice. Yes, this will wear. Yes, if you put stones through it, you'll get chips. Now the Wild Badger is metal on the sides with the metal rod going across, but then has rubber here. So I think this rubber is going to last a little bit longer. However, I think it takes away a little bit from its whipping or throwing power because that bends back slightly. However, I think that this rubber is going to last longer and probably be what most people would want over top of the plastic. Both of these guys fold up very easily just by these screws that are here. You can get them into great storage positions. There's really no difference between the two other than the height at where you're working. The Wild Badger for me is still quite low. I'd rather be pushing up higher like this, and The Greenworks is incredibly low for me. I feel like I'm pushing it more with my legs, and it was still easy to push, and in fact easier to push, because it would push straight forward, cut down to the concrete quite well, clean good, and still throw snow well. The Wild Badger, with the wheels farther back, always wanted to drift sideways on me, and I had to continue to push it into the snow further in order for it to continue to stay in the snow. Otherwise, it seemed to want to drift out of the snow into the areas that you already cleaned. If I had to say one is more powerful than the other, I would give the Wild Badger the trophy for the most powerful out of the two. It seemed like it was able to pick up more snow, even the heavier snow, and throw it a little bit further, stay running, and not have any cutouts. That was kind of a big deal while you're doing something a little bit larger. As far as battery life, both of these seem to have almost identical battery life, and I would call this similar to what the DeWalt model would call it. You were able to clean an area that covers 16 small cars. So that seems like a large area, but if you take smaller cars and line them up in an average driveway where you might park 4, that's about what you're looking at. If you take 4 trucks, park them in a square, if you have a lot of snow, that's about what you're going to get out of the battery life of these two. It's going to vary based on how wet the snow, how cold it is out, in a lot of different things. But on average, your normal 2-car garage driveway that's 100 feet long is going to be able to be taken care of by these two on one battery. Charging the batteries back up, pretty simple, takes about an hour for each. Same snow, Wild Badger. Had to clean up some of the Greenworks on the bottom, but it didn't scrape as well on the driveway. Greenworks scraped amazing. Meanwhile, if you take a look at what the DeWalt did, it throws enough snow and doesn't scrape as good to the ground, so it's not giving as good of a clean, which kind of sucks. Lots of great about the DeWalt, but at the same point, I couldn't use the Greenworks all the time because it's so small, and the Wild Badger 2 likes to kind of keep you sideways because it doesn't track well. So there's goods and bads about everything, but the cleanest one so far has been the Greenworks. Both of these snowblowers work great. It's hard to put two of these snowblowers together and say, hey, pick one, because obviously for me, I'm gonna pick the Wild Badger because that's what fits me. There's no doubt. If I was 5 foot tall, then there might be a little bit of difference, and I might say that the Wild Badger is a little bit too tall, and I really like how the setup is with the Greenworks. That's what makes these two snowblowers very, very similar, yet very, very different. As far as storage space with the Greenworks, if you didn't use it that much and you wanted something that took up very, very little space, this Greenworks is definitely where you're going to look at, because it does not take up much space in a garage. You can tip this guy forward like that, and there is nothing that really is there as far as space. Now, the Wild Badger will also tip forward, but you still have this longer area to hold things. Either way, if you're looking at budget snowblowers, know that you might have a shorter handle with the less that you pay for them. I find that interesting. I'm very impressed with what the Wild Badger stuff that's coming out. And you're finding it in Lowe's, you're finding it on Amazon, you're finding it in a lot of places. Tractor Supply Company actually carries some of that stuff. So if people say, hey, that's an off-brand, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream where we can find it in stores close to us in Michigan, which I think is interesting. Greenworks is one where I can find it more on Amazon than I can find it in the stores these days, which I find odd. But with that said, this is definitely a lesser expensive model and still works well, still has all the same features. I'm interested in your comments on what you would pick out of these two, and if you think it's fair to have two of the same snowblowers with such drastically different handle heights. That to me is kind of crazy and blows my mind. Give us a like in this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.